I clearly hold the life and death of the group in my hands, but was treated as a vase to get by. Not only did the CEO's husband humiliate her in public, even the cleaning lady dares to deduct my salary. When my phone was dropped on the ground, tiny alarm hidden in a brooch. Signals have been sent to the world's top 10 financial groups. The conference room fell silent instantly, and everyone's eyes were focused on the woman who suddenly appeared. Her aura was so strong that it was impossible to ignore it, as if the whole room had stopped for her. Leonard's expression softened, even with a hint of flattery. "Erin, why are you here?" Irene smiled slightly, her eyes swept across the people present, and finally stopped at me. "I heard that someone was talking nonsense here, and I couldn't help but come over to take a look," and immediately stepped forward, her face full of flattery. "Miss Irene, you've come at the right time. We are dealing with some internal affairs, and are afraid to disturb you." Irene waved her hand and said calmly, "It doesn't matter. I also want to see how capable this legendary president's wife is." She walked up to me, looked me up and down, and said with a disdainful smile, "Nicole, I have heard of your name for a long time. I heard that you think the Stanford family can't do without you." I looked her straight in the eye and said calmly, "This is the truth. No need to say more." Irene chuckled, as if she had heard a joke. How confident. Unfortunately, being overconfident becomes arrogance. She turned to Leonard and said, "Leonard, I think it's time for everyone to see the truth." Leonard nodded, motioning for her to continue. Irene cleared her throat, her voice clear and powerful. "Everyone, I have an important announcement today. From today on, I will officially take over part of the business of Stanford Group. I believe that under my leadership, the company will usher in new glory." There was a murmur in the conference room, and everyone showed expressions of surprise and excitement, and immediately led the applause. "Great. With Miss Irene joining us, we will definitely be able to reach a higher level." Irene nodded with satisfaction, her eyes falling on me again. "Nicole, what do you think?" I smiled slightly, my tone still calm. "Erin, do you think you can shake my position?" Her smile froze slightly, but soon returned to normal. "Really? Then we'll wait and see." At this moment, the door of the conference room was pushed open again, and a familiar figure walked in. Everyone's attention was attracted again. "Grandpa?" Leonard stood up in surprise. Nelson Stanford, the head of the Stanford family, slowly walked into the conference room. His eyes swept across the people present and finally stopped at me. "Nicole, you've been wrong." His voice was low and powerful. Irene's face turned pale in an instant. "Mr. Nelson, why are you here?" Nelson ignored her and walked straight to me. "Nicole, I heard something unpleasant happened here." I nodded and said calmly, "Grandpa, I'm just taking care of some housework." Nelson turned to look at Leonard with a stern look. "Leonard, you disappoint me so much." Leonard lowered his head, not daring to look him in the eye. "Grandpa, Nelson interrupted him. "You don't need to explain. From now on, you are suspended from all duties. Reflect on your actions." Leonard raised his head in shock. "Grandpa, this." Nelson waved his hand to signal him to shut up. Then he turned to Irene with a cold look. "Miss Irene, I have heard about your ambitions, but you shouldn't set your sights on our Stanford family." Irene's expression became even uglier. "Mr. Nelson, you misunderstood." Nelson sneered. "Misunderstanding? Do you think I don't know what you are doing behind my back?" He turned to everyone and said, "Everyone, I have an important announcement to make today. From now on, Nicole Stanford will officially take over all affairs of the Stanford Group. I believe that under her leadership, the company will usher in new glory." There was silence in the conference room. Everyone was shocked by this sudden decision. Anne's face turned pale instantly, and she said in a trembling voice, "Mr. Nelson, this." Nelson gave her a cold look and said, "Annie, you are fired. Pack up your things and leave the company immediately." Anne's legs went weak and she almost fell. She looked at Leonard with a plea for help in her eyes. Leonard lowered his head, not daring to look at her. Nelson looked at me again, his eyes soft. "Nicole, the company is in your hands." I nodded, my tone firm. "Grandpa, I won't let you down." Nelson nodded with satisfaction, then turned and left the meeting room. The conference room fell silent again, and everyone looked at me with complicated eyes. I looked around and said calmly, "Everyone, from now on, we will usher in a new beginning. I hope that everyone can work together and work hard for the development of the company." Everyone nodded, expressions of awe on their faces. Irene gritted her teeth, took one last look at me, and turned to leave the meeting room. Leonard stood there, looking at me with complicated eyes. "Nicole, I interrupted him. "Leonard, we can talk about our business later. Now, please leave the meeting room." Leonard lowered his head and left silently. I was the only one left in the conference room with other employees. I took a deep breath and said firmly, "Everyone, let's get to work." Everyone nodded and quickly returned to their seats. I know that from today on, everything will be different. I stand in front of the conference room, looking at everyone present. Those faces that once sneered at me now lowered their heads and dared not look at me. There is a subtle tension in the air, as if everyone is waiting for my next move. "Everyone," I said, my voice calm but with unquestionable majesty, "I will not pursue the past. But from now on, I hope everyone can understand one thing: the future of Stanford Group will be led by me. Every decision and every action you make will directly affect the fate of the company." Some people looked up at me secretly, then quickly lowered their heads. I could sense their uneasiness and doubts, but I didn't intend to give them too much time to digest. Time waits for no one, and the company needs to adjust its direction quickly. "First," I continued, "Annie's position will be taken over by Linda. Linda, you have been in the company for many years, and your ability and loyalty are trustworthy. I hope you can lead the team and get into shape quickly." Linda stood up from her seat with a hint of surprise and gratitude on her face. "Thank you for your trust, Miss Nicole. I will do my best to complete the work." I nodded and turned my gaze to the others. "Secondly, I will reevaluate the company's current projects. All businesses that do not conform to the company's strategic direction will be cut. We need to concentrate our resources on doing the most valuable things." There was a murmur in the conference room, but no one dared to raise an objection. I continued, "Finally, regarding the company's culture and discipline, I hope everyone can remember one thing here: respect and professionalism are the bottom line. Any behavior that violates this principle will be severely dealt with." As soon as I finished speaking, the door of the conference room was pushed open again. This time, the company's legal counsel walked in with a document in his hand. "Ms. Nicole, this is the document you requested." He handed it to me in a respectful tone. I took the document, flipped through it, and then looked up and said to everyone, "This is the company's latest equity structure document. From From today on, I will hold 51% of the shares of Stanford Group and become the actual controller of the company. There was an uproar in the conference room, and everyone's face was filled with shock. I smiled and continued, this means that every decision of the company will be made by me. I hope everyone can understand that this change is for the better future of the company. Someone couldn't help but ask, Ms. Nicole, when was this decided? I looked at him and said calmly, this is a joint decision between Mr. Nelson and I. As for the specific details, you don't need to know too much. You just need to know that from today on, Stanford Group will enter a new era. After that, I closed the file and handed it to the legal advisor. Next, I will hold a separate meeting with the heads of each department to discuss the next work arrangements in detail. Others can return to their posts and continue with the work at hand. Everyone stood up and left the meeting room one after another. I could feel their footsteps were a little heavy when they left, but I didn't care. What was important was that they understood the current situation. When Linda and I were the only ones left in the conference room, I turned to her and said, Linda, I need you to do something for me. You say. Linda responded immediately. Check Irene's background and all her activities in the company. I want to know what she did and who was behind her. My tone was calm, but there was a sharpness in my eyes. Linda nodded. Understood. I will report to you as soon as possible. I took a deep breath, walked to the window, and looked out at the city view. The Stanford Group building stood in the city center, symbolizing power and wealth. And now, all of this will be under my control. Miss Nicole, Linda asked softly, do you have any other instructions? I turned around and looked at her. One more thing. Go contact my father and tell him that I need his support. Linda nodded. Okay, I'll do it right away. After she left, I looked out the window again. The sunlight shone through the glass onto my face. I squinted my eyes slightly, silently calculating my next steps. Leonard's betrayal, Irene's ambition, and provocation. All this is just the beginning. The real challenge is still to come. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. It's me. I need you to help me check someone. Irene Carter. I want to know all her details. A deep voice came from the other end of the phone. Understood. I will give you the results as soon as possible. After hanging up the phone, I walked to the conference table, picked up the equity document, and looked through it carefully. Every number and every clause represented power and responsibility. I knew that from today on, I would no longer be just the president's wife in name only, but the real controller. Leonard, I whispered to myself, do you think you can get rid of me so easily? Unfortunately, you are too naive. I put down the documents, walked to the mirror, and adjusted my collar. The woman in the mirror had a firm look in her eyes and a sneer on her lips. She knew that this game had just begun. Stanford Group, I said to the mirror, from today on, I will write your future. I turned and left the meeting room, my steps firm and powerful. In the corridor, the employees bowed their heads when they saw me. I didn't stop, but went straight to my office. I pushed open the door, walked to my desk, and dialed the intercom. Linda, notify all senior executives to have a meeting in 1 hour. I want to announce a new strategic plan. Okay, Miss Nicole. Linda's voice came from the other end of the phone. I hung up the phone, sat on the chair, and crossed my hands on the table. The sun was still shining brightly outside the window, but a storm was brewing in my heart. Aaron, I whispered, do you think you can shake my position? Unfortunately, you chose the wrong opponent. I turned on my computer and started drafting a new strategic plan. Every word and every number was carefully considered. I knew that every step forward would determine the fate of the Stanford Group. An hour later, the senior executives walked into the meeting room. I stood up, looked at everyone, and said firmly and forcefully, everyone, today we will open a new chapter for Stanford Group. I hope you can join me in meeting this challenge. No one spoke, but their eyes revealed a new kind of awe. I knew that from this moment on, they would no longer question my authority. Now, I continued, let's get started. The meeting lasted for 3 hours. I personally took care of every detail and every decision. When the meeting ended, everyone looked a little tired, but there was a new kind of determination in their eyes. I stood up and announced the end of the meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, today's meeting ends here. I hope everyone can quickly implement today's decision. Remember, time is money. Everyone stood up and left the meeting room. I sat in my chair, took a deep breath, and felt an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. Miss Nicole, Linda came in and said softly, do you have any other instructions? I shook my head, not for now. Go and get busy. I'll call you if there's anything. Linda nodded and turned to leave. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and Leonard's face appeared in my mind. His betrayal, his indifference, his ambition, all of this will become a thing of the past. Leonard, I whispered, do you think you can get rid of me so easily? Unfortunately, you are too naive. I opened my eyes, my gaze was firm. I knew that this game had just begun, and I would be the final winner. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. The sun was still shining, but a new storm was brewing in my heart. Stanford Group, I whispered, from today on, I will be the one writing your future.